Look, more people are working remotely than ever before in history. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue to happen regardless of what goes on in the world. Whether they're working remotely full time, part time, in a different time zone, maybe locally, it's essential that all leaders really know how to manage people who do work remotely. Across many different industries, I think that there had been this world where only a few people had worked remotely, but then obviously COVID-19 comes around. Most of the world is then forced to work remotely. Some have stayed, some have been pulled back to being on site, but remote is not going away. It's going to continue to happen. And so we need to make sure that as leaders, we know how to manage people remotely. So in this session, I'm going to be taking you through some of the insights that I've gained throughout my career of managing and leading teams. I was in the IT space for a long time and I had employees all over the world. So a lot of the lessons that I'm going to share are pre-pandemic and throughout the pandemic, as I've now led organizations that are 100% remote as well. So if you are managing remote employees and they happen to be outside of your time zone, you have to remember to factor in the time zones. If you are based in North America and you have team members, say, in Australia or Japan, you have to recognize that. They are displaced from the rest of your team. There are going to be times you're going to have employees that work when you sleep. How do you connect? How do you monitor performance? How do you coach them when they're in opposite shifts? Well, as a leader, you need to flex. You need to recognize that you're going to have to spend some time out of your regular core hours and day to support those people. It shouldn't be your employees that flex. It should be you as a leader that flexes. This comes with leading a team, supervising or managing groups. Like, it's about you flexing versus making your employees flex. Now, the other thing you need to know about time zone gaps is that creates communication gaps. There's going to be delays in email responses when you're managing employees who are working remotely. So therefore, when you see a message from somebody who's displaced by time zone, you have to prioritize that response quicker, because you need to make sure that you're connecting with them as much as possible. And if they're displaced by a few hours or a couple of days, by like when it falls on a weekend, that's going to hurt their experience and it's going to make them more engaged. They're going to feel really alone. So prioritizing their communication is important. It's also important that we make sure that as we're managing remote teams, we leverage collaboration tools quite well too. A lot of people didn't know that they already had access to Microsoft Teams or they already had Slack in their businesses when the pandemic first happened. People were forced to work remotely. So many people just didn't know that they had a Microsoft Office 365 subscription. They didn't have Teams on it. So then they had to learn how to use it. I think that we have to realize that we're underutilizing technology quite a bit. There's a huge opportunity for those people who are leading remote teams to fully leverage the suite that's available to them. All the different features that happen to make their lives easier. Those programs have gotten so much better. So let's fully leverage them as much as possible. We want to make sure that we are encouraging everyone to be using video, not just having the video off and just only hearing the audio version, but like connecting in person, seeing someone, talking about what's going on in their life, but like being able to see them is important. And it's going to provide for better connection. There's going to be times too that you're never ever going to see somebody if they work remotely. But if you can do it, if the budget allows for it, find a way to actually come together where you go to them or they come to you at least once a year. You should have the team come together. That's going to be critical to make a more engaging workforce, especially as you're managing remotely. The last piece I'll say here when it comes to managing remotely that I think is important is that you as the leader are often their primary connection. When you are leading people who work remotely, as a leader, you are sometimes the best and first connection point for some employees. They're going to talk to you more than others sometimes as well. So you have to make sure that you're sharing what's going on throughout the course of the day, being intentional about what's happening across the business. Providing regular communication and updates is so critical because they feel disconnected. So as a leader, if you're not connecting with your remote staff on a regular basis, you're going to have a team that's not going to operate quite effectively. It's one of the biggest risks that I think that I've seen throughout my career is that those who work as leaders fail to connect as often as they could or should with their people, and that's just going to make it really tough. Because if they're out of sight, if they're out of mind, therefore they're going to feel like they don't matter as much. Remember, as a leader, with great power comes great responsibility. It's the role of a leader to make sure that they are including everyone who works remotely, making them feel part of the team, and making sure that they are leading them the right way.